There's a particular kind of panic that comes with ruining a stranger's expensive suit. Not the apologetic kind where you offer to pay for dry cleaning, but the primal, fight-or-flight kind that makes your blood turn to ice water. Sophia knew that panic intimately now. She'd been replaying the moment for 3 days straight, watching it unfold in her mind like a car crash in slow motion. The coffee cup slipping from her trembling fingers. The dark liquid arcing through the air in a perfect, terrible parabola. The way it splashed across pristine white fabric, spreading like blood across snow. And then his hand, strong and unforgiving, closing around her wrist before she could even think to run. If this story touches your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from. And if you feel it was really worth it, consider becoming a member to get early access to upcoming stories. Your support makes all the difference. The morning had started ordinarily enough. Sophia had been working double shifts at Café Marchesi for 3 months, ever since her mother's medical bills had started piling up faster than she could count them. The café sat in the heart of Milan's fashion district, where a single espresso cost more than she made in an hour, and the clientele wore watches that could pay her rent for a year. She'd learned to move invisibly through that world, to pour drinks and clear tables without drawing attention, to exist in the spaces between wealthy people's conversations. She'd gotten good at being nobody. That morning, she'd been carrying a tray of drinks to a corner table. Her 3rd hour into a shift that wouldn't end for another 9 hours. Her feet ached in shoes she couldn't afford to replace. Her mother had called twice already, confused about where she was, the dementia making her forget that Sophia had explained everything just yesterday. The tray was heavy. Her hands were shaking. She should have been more careful. The man had appeared from nowhere, moving through the cafe like he owned it. Maybe he did. She wouldn't have been surprised. He wore his authority like other men wore cologne, something expensive and impossible to ignore. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on Roman statues. Sharp jaw, sharper eyes the color of smoke and steel. The kind of man who made the air shift when he entered a room. Sophia had been watching him without meaning to, the way you can't help but watch a storm rolling in. She'd registered the men flanking him, the way other patrons suddenly found their phones fascinating. The subtle tension that rippled through the space like electricity before lightning strikes. And then her shoe caught on absolutely nothing. Because of course it did. Because her luck had always been terrible, and today it decided to be catastrophic. The tray tilted. The cup flew. The coffee painted his chest in dark, damning evidence of her clumsiness. For one crystalline moment, the entire cafe held its breath. She'd looked up at him, this man she'd just drenched in scalding espresso, and found him staring down at her with an expression she couldn't read. Not anger. Not exactly. Something colder. More dangerous. Calculating. His hand had moved so fast, she didn't see it coming. One moment she was frozen in horror. The next, his fingers were wrapped around her wrist, firm enough to keep her from running but not quite painful. Yet. The touch sent electricity up her arm, part fear, part something else she didn't want to examine. "Clumsy girls get punished," he'd said, his voice low and smooth like expensive whiskey. It carried an accent she couldn't place. Italian, but with edges that suggested elsewhere. Everywhere. His thumb pressed against her pulse point, surely feeling how her heart hammered like a trapped bird. She'd opened her mouth to apologize, to beg, to explain that she couldn't afford to lose this job, that her mother needed her, that she was sorry, so sorry. But no words came. She'd stood there, coffee dripping from her fingers onto marble floors, staring into eyes that seemed to see straight through her skin to count every secret she'd ever kept. "You work here," he'd stated, not asked. "Every day?" She'd managed a nod. "Good. You'll pay your debt then." not with money. Her manager had appeared, sweating and apologetic, already firing her with his eyes, while his mouth made excuses to this man, this clearly important, clearly dangerous man, whose name everyone seemed to know except her. But the man, he'd waved the manager away like dismissing a fly. "The girl works for me now," he'd announced, "until her debt is paid." And just like that, Sophia's life had changed. No discussion, no negotiation, no choice. His men had given her an address, a time to arrive, instructions delivered in clipped tones that suggested disobedience wasn't an option being offered. Then he'd released her wrist, the absence of his touch somehow worse than its presence, and walked away without looking back. The coffee stain remained on his shirt, a mark, evidence, proof that she'd touched something she shouldn't have. That night, Sophia had researched the address they'd given her. It led to a villa in the hills overlooking the city, the kind of place that appeared in architecture magazines and celebrity gossip columns, the kind of place where people like her only existed to serve. She'd tried to find information about the man himself, but came up with nothing concrete. Whispers, rumors, suggestions of family connections that ran deep into Milan's oldest and most powerful circles. Business interests that seemed legitimate on the surface, but felt wrong somehow, like perfectly forged paintings. And underneath it all, a single name that people typed in forums and then quickly deleted. Alessio Conti. The name itself felt dangerous in her mouth. She'd spent 3 days paralyzed between terror and pragmatism. Terror, because everything in her screamed that this was wrong, that men who grabbed strange women and declared ownership were not men to be trusted. Pragmatism, because she'd called the cafe and been told not to return, because her mother's medications cost more than she had, because she'd been drowning in debt before, and now she was drowning in debt, plus unemployment. On the morning of the 4th day, she dressed in her only professional outfit, a black dress she'd worn to her grandmother's funeral, and taken the bus as far as it would go toward the address. The last mile she'd walked, her heels clicking against cobblestones, watching the city fall away below her as she climbed into a different world. The villa wasn't what she expected. She'd anticipated something cold and modern, glass and steel designed to intimidate. Instead, she found aged stone and climbing roses, windows that glowed warm in the early morning light, gardens that looked like they'd been growing wild for centuries. It was beautiful. That somehow made it worse. A woman answered the door, elderly but sharp-eyed, dressed in black with silver hair pulled into a neat bun. She looked Sophia up and down with the kind of assessment that missed nothing, then stepped aside without a word. The interior was all warm wood and soft light, artwork that looked original hanging on walls that had witnessed generations. It smelled like espresso and old books and something floral she couldn't identify. Nothing about it screamed danger, and yet Sophia's instincts thrummed with warning. She was led through corridors that turned and twisted, past rooms she glimpsed but didn't enter, until finally the woman stopped before a heavy wooden door. She knocked once, waited, then opened it, and gestured Sophia inside, before disappearing without explanation. The office was all dark wood and leather, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with volumes in multiple languages, a massive desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of oak. And behind that desk, Alessio Conti, wearing a fresh suit and an expression that gave away absolutely nothing. He didn't stand when she entered, didn't acknowledge her immediately, just continued reading whatever document held his attention, making her wait, making her feel the weight of her presumption in being here, in existing in his space. Sophia stood frozen just inside the door, her purse clutched in both hands like a shield, trying to remember how to breathe normally. Finally, he looked up. Those smoke-gray eyes found hers and held them, and she felt pinned like a butterfly in a collector's case. "You came," he said. It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. "You considered not coming." Again, not a question. How did he know? Had someone been watching her? The thought made her skin crawl. "I considered it," she admitted, surprising herself with honesty. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "But I need the work." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away. She didn't. Something stubborn in her refused to give him that. "Your mother," he said. "Stage 3 dementia. Medical bills approximately 8,000 euros behind. You work, or worked, 60 hours a week at minimum wage. You've been selling your possessions slowly. Last week, you sold your grandmother's necklace for 400 euros. It was worth 3,000. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. "How do you know that?" "I know everything I need to know about people who enter my life, even accidentally." The casual invasion of her privacy should have terrified her. It did terrify her. But underneath the fear, something else stirred. Anger, maybe. Or resignation. She'd been exposed, examined, cataloged. There was no point in pretending anymore. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I spilled coffee on you. I'll pay for the dry cleaning, the suit replacement, whatever it costs. I'll work it off. I just need to know what you want." "What I want," he repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. He stood then, moving around the desk with the grace of something predatory. Sophia forced herself not to step back. "Is for you to understand your position. You damaged something of mine. In my world, there are consequences for carelessness. But I'm not unreasonable. You'll work here, in my home, until your debt is satisfied." "How much? How much is the debt?" He smiled then, and it was not a comforting expression. "We'll discuss terms. For now, you start today. Maria, the woman who let you in, will explain your duties. You'll have a room here. I expect you at 6 each morning. You leave when your work is complete. You don't speak about what you see or hear in this house. You don't ask questions. You don't go where you're not invited. Do you understand? I have a mother who needs me. She's been moved to a private care facility as of this morning. Full-time nursing staff, medications provided, the best care available." Sophia's heart stopped. "What did you do?" "I took care of a problem. Your debt just increased, but so did your incentive to stay. Consider it an investment in your loyalty. You can't just," she started, then stopped. Because clearly he could. He had. While she'd been agonizing over whether to come here, he'd already moved her mother, already taken control of another piece of Sophia's life. "You have no right." "I have every right. Your mother needed help you couldn't provide. Now she has it. You'll work off the cost. It's a simple transaction." "Nothing about this is simple," Sophia said, and was surprised to hear her voice shaking with fury rather than fear. "You can't just buy people. I didn't buy you. I gave you an opportunity to pay your debts and care for your mother. You're free to refuse. Walk out that door right now. Your mother will be returned to wherever she was, and we'll never see each other again." The offer hung in the air between them. Sophia wanted to call his bluff, wanted to believe he wouldn't actually throw a sick woman out of care just to prove a point. But looking at him, at the absolute certainty in his expression, she knew he would. He'd do exactly what he said, without hesitation or regret. "What are my duties?" she asked quietly. "For now, you'll assist Maria with household management, cleaning, organizing, preparing meals when we have guests. Simple work. You're capable of following instructions." "Yes." "Then we won't have problems." He returned to his desk, picking up his papers again, dismissing her. Sophia stood there a moment longer, trying to process what had just happened. She'd walked in here expecting punishment, expecting to be shouted at or demeaned. Instead, she'd been conscripted. Her life rearranged like furniture to suit his convenience. Maria was waiting in the hallway when Sophia emerged. The older woman's expression hadn't changed, but something in her eyes suggested she'd heard everything through the door. "This way," she said simply, and started walking. Sophia followed through more corridors, up a flight of stairs worn smooth by generations of feet, into a wing of the house that felt older, quieter. Maria stopped at a door and opened it to reveal a room that made Sophia's breath catch. It wasn't large, but it was beautiful. A bed with an iron frame and soft linens, a window overlooking the gardens, a small desk, a wardrobe that looked antique, personal space in a way she hadn't had since her childhood. "This is yours," Maria said. "Bathroom is shared down the hall. You keep it clean. Meals are at 7, 1, and 8. You eat with the staff unless told otherwise. Alessio doesn't like questions, doesn't like excuses, doesn't like lateness. You do your work, keep your head down, you'll be fine." "And if I'm not fine?" Maria's expression softened slightly. "Then you leave. But your mother stays in care until someone else pays those bills." Sophia sank onto the bed after Maria left, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. She should run. She should call the police, call someone, do something other than accept this insane situation. But who would she call? What would she say? A powerful man had moved her mother to better care and offered her a job to pay for it. That didn't sound like a crime. It sounded like charity with strings attached. Except it wasn't charity. It was control. She'd seen it in his eyes, heard it in his voice. He'd looked at her life like a chessboard and moved all her pieces before she'd even realized the game had started. The first week passed in a blur of adjustment and anxiety. Sophia woke before dawn each day, dressed in the simple black uniform Maria provided, and threw herself into work that was physically exhausting, but mercifully straightforward. She cleaned rooms that seemed to clean themselves, polished silver that already gleamed, arranged flowers in vases that cost more than her monthly salary used to be. The villa operated with the precision of a luxury hotel, though only a handful of people seemed to actually live there. Besides Alessio, there was Luca, a man in his 40s, who appeared to be some kind of assistant or advisor, always on his phone, always moving with purpose. Marco, younger and quieter, who seemed to handle security. And the household staff, Maria and 2 other women, Teresa and Gabriella, who'd worked for the Conti family for decades and treated Sophia with cautious neutrality. She learned quickly to read the rhythms of the house. Morning was quiet. Alessio typically locked in his office or gone entirely. Afternoons brought visitors, men in expensive suits, who arrived in expensive cars and spoke in low voices behind closed doors. Evenings were unpredictable. Sometimes the house emptied completely. Sometimes it filled with tension she could taste in the air. Sophia kept her head down and her mouth shut, just as Maria had advised. But she watched. She couldn't help but watch. Alessio moved through his domain like a king surveying his kingdom, commanding absolute loyalty with nothing more than his presence. People jumped when he entered rooms. Conversations stopped. Even Maria, who seemed afraid of nothing, straightened her spine and softened her voice around him. He barely acknowledged Sophia's existence that first week, would pass her in hallways without a glance, accept coffee she served without comment, exist in the same spaces as her as if she were furniture. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like waiting for a storm that wouldn't break. On the 8th day, everything changed. Sophia had been dusting the library, a room she'd quickly come to love despite herself. The books here weren't for show. They'd been read, loved, worn soft by handling, poetry in Italian and English and French, philosophy, history, novels with cracked spines, and annotations in the margins written in a strong, slanted hand. She'd been reaching for a high shelf when her fingers brushed a volume and it tumbled, falling open on the floor. As she bent to retrieve it, she saw it was Dante's Inferno, and the margins were filled with notes, observations, arguments with the text. She found herself reading them, drawn into a conversation across time with whoever had written them. That's when she heard his voice behind her. Finding something interesting? She spun, heart hammering, the book clutched to her chest. Alessio stood in the doorway, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. She'd never seen him even slightly informal before. It made him more human and somehow more dangerous. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," she stammered. "To read?" he finished, moving into the room. "It's a library. Books are meant to be read." She set the volume back on the shelf carefully. "I was cleaning. I knocked it over." He crossed to where she stood, took the book back down, opened it to one of the annotated pages. "What do you think?" "About what?" "His interpretation. Dante's Guide Through Hell. Do you think he earned his redemption?" Sophia stared at him, trying to process the question. This was the man who'd conscripted her into servitude, who'd moved her mother like a chess piece, who ruled his world with absolute control. And he was asking her opinion on 14th century poetry. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I've never read it." "You've never read Dante?" His expression registered something that might have been surprise. "You're Italian and you've never read Dante? I dropped out of school at 16 to work. Literature wasn't a priority." Something shifted in his face. Not quite regret, but close. "Sit," he said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs. She sat because what else could she do? He settled into the chair opposite, the book open in his hands. "I'll read it to you." "No, you don't have to. It's fine. I should get back to. Maria can wait." He started reading, his voice transforming the archaic Italian into music. Sophia sat frozen, caught between the desire to flee and the magnetic pull of his voice, the way the words sounded in his mouth. He read for 20 minutes, translating passages into modern Italian when the old dialect became too obscure, explaining references, asking her what she thought of certain images. And somehow, impossibly, she forgot to be afraid. She argued with him about whether Dante's punishments fit the crimes, suggested that maybe hell was just people's own guilt made manifest, watched his eyes light with something that might have been respect when she made a point he hadn't considered. When Maria appeared in the doorway, clearing her throat meaningfully, Sophia jolted back to reality. She'd been sitting here, talking to Alessio Conti like an equal, like a person, like someone whose thoughts mattered. "I should," she stood quickly. "Yes." He closed the book but didn't stand. "Tomorrow. Same time." "We'll continue. That's not necessary." It wasn't a suggestion, Sophia. The use of her name, the first time he'd spoken it, sent a shiver through her. She nodded and fled. That night, alone in her room, Sophia tried to reconcile the man who'd read Dante to her with the man who'd essentially kidnapped her into employment. They didn't fit together. Unless they did. Unless he was exactly what he appeared to be. Someone comfortable with contradiction, with existing in multiple truths simultaneously. The library sessions became routine. Every afternoon, unless he was away or had meetings that ran long, she found him waiting in the library with a book. They worked through Inferno, then Purgatorio, then Paradiso, then moved to other works, Leopardi, Ungaretti, Montale. Sometimes he read. Sometimes she did, her voice growing more confident with the language. Always they talked. Not about his business. Not about her situation. About ideas. About beauty and suffering, and whether meaning could be found or only created. About truth and lies, and the spaces between them. She learned things about him in these sessions. That he'd studied literature at university before, his words, life happened. That he spoke 6 languages fluently. That he'd traveled everywhere but felt at home nowhere. That he thought too much and slept too little. That underneath the cold control was something searingly intelligent and desperately lonely. And he learned things about her. That she'd wanted to be a teacher before money made it impossible. That she read to her mother every night before the dementia took her ability to follow stories. That she believed in kindness even when the world gave her no reason to. That she was stronger than she looked. That she saw him, really saw him, and wasn't afraid of what she found. After a month, Sophia visited her mother at the care facility. She'd been resisting, afraid of what she'd find. Afraid that Alessio's promise of good care was just another manipulation. Instead, she found her mother in a bright room with a view of gardens, clean and well-fed, hair brushed, wearing a new nightgown that actually fit. The staff knew her mother's name, her preferences, handled her confusion with patience and respect. "Mama," Sophia said softly, taking the frail hand in hers. The woman looked at her with vague recognition. "Do I know you, dear?" "I'm Sophia, your daughter." The words hurt, but less than they used to. Her mother smiled. What a pretty name. Sophia stayed for hours, reading aloud even though her mother dozed. Just being present in a way she hadn't been able to afford before. When she returned to the villa that evening, she found Alessio in the library as usual. She stood in the doorway, trying to find words for what she was feeling. "Thank you," she finally said, "for my mother. The care is exceptional." He looked up from his book. "I told you it would be." "Why? Why does any of this matter to you? I spilled coffee on your shirt. That doesn't warrant restructuring my entire life." He set the book aside. "You want honesty?" She nodded. "When you spilled that coffee, I was having the worst day I'd had in years. Business problems I couldn't solve. Family obligations I couldn't escape. I was walking into that cafe to meet someone I didn't want to meet, about something I didn't want to do. And then you appeared, this clumsy girl with frightened eyes. And you ruined my €5,000 suit." Her breath caught. 5,000. He smiled slightly. "You have no idea how much damage you did." But in that moment, everything else stopped. The problems, the obligations, all of it fell away. And I looked at you and thought, here's something unexpected. Here's chaos in my carefully controlled world. Here's someone who doesn't know who I am or what I'm capable of. Someone who's just terrified she's going to lose her job. It was refreshing. So I held on to it. Onto you. Sophia moved further into the room. "That's insane." "Probably. But my life is insane. I make decisions that affect hundreds of people. I solve problems that have no good solutions. I exist in a world where everyone wants something from me, and no one tells me the truth. And then you argue with me about poetry. You tell me when you think I'm wrong about Dante's symbolism. You look at me like I'm just a man, not a useful connection, not a threat, just a man." "Is that what this is?" she asked. "Some kind of game where you get to feel normal by keeping me prisoner?" "You're not a prisoner. I can't leave. Not without destroying my mother's care." "True. So maybe you're a prisoner who gets books and philosophical discussions instead of chains." He stood, moved closer. "Would you rather have the chains? Would it be more honest?" She should step back. Every instinct screamed at her to maintain distance. But she didn't move. "I don't know what I want." Liar. The word was soft, but absolute. You want to leave and you want to stay. You want to hate me, and you want to understand me. You want safety, and you want danger. You're full of contradictions, Sophia, and you don't know what to do with them. That makes two of us, she whispered. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were gentle, the touch barely there, but it sent electricity through her entire body. This is a bad idea, he said. What is? This. Us. Whatever this is becoming. Then stop. I can't. The confession hung between them. Sophia felt her heartbeat in her throat. She knew she should run. Knew this man was dangerous. Knew nothing good could come from whatever was building in the space between them. But she'd been drowning for so long, and he was offering air, even if it was poisoned, even if it would kill her. At least she'd breathe first. Tell me something true, she said. Something real. Not about poetry or philosophy. About you. What do you want to know? Everything. Why you do what you do. What you're afraid of. What keeps you up at night. Why you're so alone in this enormous house full of people. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Those are dangerous questions. I'm already in danger. The moment you grabbed my wrist in that cafe, I was in danger. So tell me. Make it mean something. Alessio moved to the window, staring out at the city lights below. My father built an empire, he began. Not legally, not ethically, but effectively. When I was 17, someone put 3 bullets in his chest while I watched. My mother had died years before. My sister, she disappeared after the funeral. I never saw her again. At 22, I inherited everything. The business, the debts, the enemies, the impossible weight of trying to keep hundreds of people employed, alive, safe in a world that runs on violence and fear. Sophia moved to stand beside him. Why not leave? Walk away? And do what? Let everything collapse. Let the families that depend on us starve. Let rival organizations carve up our territory and kill anyone who ever worked for us. This isn't a job you quit, Sophia. It's a cage I was born into. You could choose different. Could I? He turned to face her. When you're taught from childhood that strength is everything, that showing weakness gets you killed, that the world is divided into predators and prey, and your only choice is which one to be, how do you suddenly become different? How do you trust that kindness isn't just another form of suicide? You start small, she said, one choice at a time. You read poetry. You take care of an old woman's daughter even though you don't have to. You create small pockets of gentleness in a harsh world. That's not redemption. It's not meant to be. Redemption is a destination. This is just direction. He stared at her, and she watched something crack in his expression, something vulnerable breaking through the armor. You're dangerous, he said softly. How? By making me want things I can't have. Like what? Like this. He kissed her, not roughly, not demanding, softly, tentatively, as if she were something precious that might shatter. His hand cupped her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about him. Sophia froze, her mind screaming warnings her body ignored. She should push him away, should maintain boundaries, should protect herself from the inevitable pain of wanting someone impossible. Instead, she kissed him back. Her hands found his shirt, gripping the fabric like an anchor. His other arm circled her waist, pulling her closer, but still careful, still asking permission with every movement. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. This is a mistake, he said again. Probably, she agreed. But neither of them moved away. They stood there in the library, wrapped in each other, the city glittering below them through the windows, pretending for just a moment that they were normal people who'd met under normal circumstances. that their kiss was simple instead of complicated, that wanting each other wasn't a form of madness. Eventually, reluctantly, Alessio stepped back. "You should go." Sophia nodded but couldn't quite make herself leave. "Will you regret this?" He considered the question seriously. "Every day, probably. But I'd regret not doing it more." That night, Sophia lay in her small room, fingers touching her lips, trying to understand what had happened. She'd kissed Alessio Conti, the man who essentially owned her, the man whose world operated on violence and fear, the man who read her poetry and looked at her like she was the solution to a problem he didn't know he had. It was insane. It was wonderful. It was terrifying. The next day, everything was different, and exactly the same. Alessio was busy with meetings, gone before she woke and not returning until late. But he left a book on the library table. Neruta's love poems. The message was clear. 3 days later, Sophia was cleaning Alessio's office when she found papers she shouldn't have seen. Invoices, shipping manifests. Names of companies she recognized from news reports about criminal investigations. Evidence of exactly what kind of business he really ran. She shouldn't have looked, should have cleaned around them, pretended not to notice. But curiosity had always been her weakness. The numbers were staggering. The scope impossible. This wasn't just one man's criminal enterprise. This was an empire, exactly as he'd said. Hundreds of people. Millions of euros. Networks that stretched across Europe and beyond. And underneath it all, violence, implied in every contract, written between every line. She was still standing there, papers in hand, when he walked in. He stopped in the doorway, assessed the situation instantly. "Found something interesting?" His voice was carefully neutral, but she heard the tension underneath. Sophia set the papers down carefully. "I wasn't snooping. I was cleaning. And you were curious. I don't blame you. But now you know." He moved into the room, closing the door behind him. "Now you understand exactly what I am. I already knew what you were. Knowing and seeing evidence are different things." He stood on the other side of the desk, the papers between them like a trial exhibit. "Are you afraid now?" "Should I be?" "That's not an answer." Sophia took a breath. "Yes, I'm afraid. You should be. But not of me," she continued. "For you. There's a difference." He stared at her. "You're not making sense. All of this," she gestured at the papers. "This empire built on fear. It's going to destroy you. It's already destroying you. That's why you can't sleep. Why you're alone. Why you read poetry about hell like you're studying a map of somewhere you're planning to visit." "I visit hell every day, Sophia. I live there. Then leave. Just leave. We've had this conversation, and my answer hasn't changed. It can't. There are too many people depending on me. Or maybe you're just afraid." "Of what?" "Of being weak. Of choosing something other than power. Of finding out who you are when you're not defined by your father's empire." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand. I understand that you're trapped, but not by circumstances. By fear." She moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. "I understand that you want out but don't know how. That you've been in survival mode so long you've forgotten what it's like to actually live. That you kissed me 3 days ago and have been avoiding me ever since, because connection terrifies you more than any enemy." Alessio's hands clenched at his sides. "Stop." "Why?" "Because you're making me want things that will get us both killed." She reached up, touched his face, felt him flinch, and then lean into her palm. "Then maybe we choose to live before we die." He pulled her against him roughly, his control finally cracking. This kiss was different from the first, desperate, hungry, like drowning people gasping for air. His hands tangled in her hair. Hers gripped his shoulders. They kissed like the world was ending. Maybe it was. When they broke apart this time, his eyes were wild. "My bedroom," he said. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes. He took her hand, led her through corridors she'd never been allowed in before, to a room that was surprisingly simple. A large bed, dark furniture, windows overlooking gardens bathed in moonlight. Nothing excessive. Nothing meant to impress. Just his space. Private. Real. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough. "This changes everything." "I know. You can still leave. Walk away. I'll make sure your mother stays in care regardless. I'll pay off your debts. You'll be free." Sophia looked at him. This complicated, damaged, dangerous man who read her poetry and kissed her like she was precious. Free of what? Of me. Of this. Of whatever happens next. She moved closer, started unbuttoning his shirt. "What if I don't want to be free of you? What if I want to see what happens next?" "Sophia, say no, and I'll stop. I'll walk away right now. We'll never speak of this again." She pulled his shirt open, pressed her palm against his chest, felt his heart hammering as hard as hers. "I'm not saying no." He lifted her, carried her to the bed, with a tenderness that made her throat ache. Laid her down like she was something infinitely precious, stood looking at her for a long moment, backlit by moonlight, his expression unreadable. "I've never done this," she whispered. "I know. Does that matter?" "It matters because I don't want to hurt you. You already have power to hurt me. This just makes it more literal. Promise me something. Anything. If this is wrong, if I'm moving too fast, if you change your mind, you'll tell me. You'll stop me." She pulled him down to her. "I promise." What followed was slow and careful and completely overwhelming. Alessio kissed every inch of exposed skin like he was memorizing her, removed her clothes piece by piece, giving her time to adjust, to breathe, to choose this moment by moment. He told her she was beautiful in Italian, in English, in languages she didn't recognize, but understood anyway from the tone of his voice. When he finally moved inside her, she cried out, pain and pleasure mixing into something indescribable. He froze. "Did I hurt you?" "No. Don't stop. Please don't stop." He moved slowly, carefully, watching her face for any sign of distress. But Sophia was lost in sensation, in the overwhelming intimacy of being this close to another person, of choosing vulnerability even knowing the cost. When it was over, he held her while she shook, not from cold, but from the enormity of what had just happened. They'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Changed something fundamental between them. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. "I don't know. That's honest." She turned in his arms to face him. "Do you regret it? Ask me tomorrow, when the consequences start." Tomorrow came with blood on the sheets. Sophia woke to find Alessio already awake, staring at the evidence of her virginity with an expression she'd never seen before. Something between wonder and horror. "You gave me this," he said softly. "You gave me something you can never get back." "I know." "Why?" She considered lying, considered offering some practical explanation. But they'd gone too far for anything less than truth. "Because I wanted to. Because I trust you. Because I wanted my first time to be my choice, not something taken from me. Because despite everything, despite logic and reason and self-preservation, I wanted it to be you." He closed his eyes. "You shouldn't trust me. Probably not. But I do anyway." Alessio pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. "I don't deserve this. Deserve you. No one deserves anyone. We're not transactions. We're just people making choices and hoping they're the right ones. What if this is the wrong one? Then we'll deal with the consequences together." The word together seemed to break something in him. He kissed her, desperate and grateful and terrified all at once. And Sophia understood that she'd given him something more precious than her virginity. She'd given him hope, the possibility of not being alone, the dangerous, impossible idea that maybe he could have this, could have her, could have a life that included softness alongside the violence. The next weeks passed in a haze of stolen moments. They kept their relationship hidden from the household, from Alessio's associates, from everyone. But in private, behind closed doors, they existed in a bubble of intimacy that felt impossible and perfect. He taught her things about her body she'd never imagined, made her feel desired and precious and powerful, whispered confessions in the dark about his fears, his regrets, his dreams of a different life. She gave him space to be vulnerable, to admit weakness, to be human instead of the untouchable figure everyone else saw. And slowly, carefully, she watched him begin to change. It started small. He began delegating more, trusting others to handle problems he used to micromanage. Spent less time in his office, more time in the library with her. Started talking about his sister again, wondering where she was, whether she'd found peace. Started questioning whether the empire was worth the cost. Luca noticed first. He found Sophia in the hallway one afternoon, his expression unreadable. "Whatever you're doing to him, keep doing it. Excuse me." Alessio, he's different. Lighter somehow. Less likely to put a bullet in someone for minor infractions. It's good for business and better for his soul. "I'm not doing anything." Liar. But he smiled when he said it. The staff noticed, too. Maria actually smiled at Sophia one morning. A real smile. Not just professional courtesy. "You're good for him," she said simply. Teresa and Gabriella started including her in their gossip, treating her less like temporary help and more like family. Even Marco, the silent security chief, nodded respectfully when he saw her. It was terrifying. This acceptance, this sense that she belonged here, because she knew it was fragile, built on secrets and stolen moments. One wrong move and it could all shatter. The shattering came on a Tuesday. Sophia was in the kitchen helping Maria prepare dinner when raised voices echoed from Alessio's office. Not unusual, business meetings often involved shouting, but this felt different, more personal, more dangerous. Then a crash, something breaking. Sophia moved toward the office before thinking, Maria's warning shout lost behind her. She pushed open the door to find Alessio standing over a man she didn't recognize, his fist bloody, paper scattered everywhere. The stranger's face was already swelling. "What the hell is going on?" she demanded. "Sophia, get out!" Alessio said without looking at her. "Now!" "No, not until you tell me what happened." The stranger laughed, blood on his teeth. "So, this is her. The girl everyone's whispering about. The stray you picked up." Alessio's hand shot out, gripping the man's collar. "Watch your mouth." "Or what?" "You'll kill me over some nobody? She's not worth dying for, Conti, and you're not worth listening to. Get out. Before I forget we're family." "Family?" Sophia's voice came out small. The stranger turned to her, cruel amusement in his eyes. "He didn't tell you? I'm his cousin. Marco, the heir apparent before Alessio's father died, the one who got pushed out when this one took over. And I've been waiting years for him to show weakness. Congratulations, sweetheart. You're his weakness." "Get out," Alessio repeated, his voice deadly quiet. Marco stood, straightening his jacket. "I'm going. But this isn't over. You brought an outsider into family business. You're compromised. The others won't stand for it. There are no others. Just you and your delusions. We'll see. He left, slamming the door. Silence filled the office like poison gas. Sophia stared at Alessio, waiting for explanation, apology, something. He wouldn't look at her. "Is it true?" she finally asked. "Are you compromised because of me?" "It's complicated. That's not an answer." "Sophia, you don't understand how this world works. Then explain it to me." He turned then, and the anguish in his face made her step back. "In my world, love is weakness. Caring about someone makes you vulnerable. It gives your enemies a target. It makes you hesitate when you should act. It gets people killed." "Are you saying you love me?" He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration she'd never seen from him. "I'm saying I'm in too deep. I'm saying every day you're here, every moment we spend together, I'm putting a target on your back. I'm saying Marco is right, and I hate that he's right. So what do you want to do? Send me away?" "That would be smart. But I can't. I've tried. I lie awake at night planning how to get you somewhere safe, somewhere far from here. And then morning comes, and I see you, and all my carefully constructed plans fall apart. Because I'm selfish. Because I want you here, even knowing what it costs." Sophia moved closer. "What if I want to be here? What if I choose this, knowing the risks? You don't know what you're choosing. Then tell me. Make me understand." He started pacing, the words pouring out like he'd been holding them back forever. "My world runs on fear and respect. Show weakness. Show that you care about something more than power, and people will use it against you. They'll take what you love and destroy it to destroy you. I've seen it happen. I've done it to others. Used their families, their lovers, their children as leverage. It's how the game works, and now you're in the game whether you want to be or not. Maybe I don't want to play. You don't have a choice anymore. Marco knows about you. Which means his associates know. Which means every enemy I have is now looking at you and seeing opportunity, seeing the weak spot in my armor. So what do we do?" Alessio stopped pacing, looked at her directly. "I have to make a choice. Send you away and keep you safe, but lose you. Or keep you here and protect you, but put you in constant danger. Or you could do something else." "Like what?" "Leave this world. Walk away from all of it." His laugh was bitter. "I told you, it doesn't work that way." "Why not?" "Because people like me don't get to retire. We either die in power, or we die trying to leave. There's no peaceful exit." "What about your sister?" She got out. "And I haven't heard from her in 8 years. For all I know, she's dead. Or she's alive and free and happy somewhere you can't find her." The hope in her voice seemed to physically hurt him. "Even if that's true, even if she somehow escaped, I can't. I have responsibilities, people depending on me. Luca, Marco, Teresa, Gabriella, Maria, hundreds of employees across dozens of businesses. I can't just abandon them. You could transition, train someone to take over. Slowly step back. That takes years. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we're careful. We're smart. We protect each other." Sophia reached for his hand. "I'm not asking for easy. I'm just asking for possible. Is there any version of this where we both survive and stay together?" He pulled her close, held her like she might disappear. "I don't know, but I'll try. God help me, I'll try." That conversation marked a shift. Alessio became more cautious, more protective. Sophia wasn't allowed to leave the villa grounds alone. Marco increased security, though his expression made clear he thought it was futile. The household staff closed ranks around them, protective and loyal. But the peace didn't last. 2 weeks later, Sophia was in the garden reading when someone grabbed her from behind, a hand over her mouth, an arm around her waist, being dragged toward the perimeter wall where a car waited, engine running. She fought, kicking and thrashing, but her attacker was stronger. "This is a message," he hissed in her ear. "Tell Conti his weakness will destroy him." Then pain exploded across her skull, and everything went black. She woke in the villa's clinic, head throbbing, Maria's worried face swimming into focus. "Shh, don't move. You're safe." "Alessio? He's dealing with it." Sophia tried to sit up, immediately regretted it. "What happened? You were taken. Marco's team got you back before the car left the property. You've been unconscious for 3 hours. Alessio has been." She paused, deciding how to phrase it. "Dealing with those responsible." Meaning? Meaning they won't be a problem anymore. The finality in Maria's voice made Sophia's blood run cold. She understood what dealing with it meant. What Alessio was capable of when someone threatened what was his. The door burst open and Alessio entered, blood on his hands, fury and fear warring in his expression. He stopped when he saw her awake, something breaking in his face. "You're okay." "I'm okay." He moved to her side, taking her hand carefully, as if she might shatter. His hands were shaking. "I'm so sorry. This is my fault." "It's not." "It is. I should have sent you away the moment Marco showed up. Should have known this would happen. But I was selfish. I wanted you close, and it nearly got you killed." Sophia squeezed his hand. "I'm still here. Still choosing this. After everything that just happened, you're still choosing this?" She looked at him. This man who'd read her poetry and changed her life, and just killed people to protect her. "Yes, I'm still choosing this. I'm choosing you." That night, after Maria left them alone, Alessio held Sophia with desperate gentleness. "I can't lose you," he whispered against her hair. "Then don't. Change things. Actually change things instead of just talking about it." "How?" "Talk to your people. The ones you trust. Luca, Marco, the others. Find out who actually wants out of this life, who'd support a transition. Build something different, something legitimate. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. But it's possible, unless you've decided it's easier to keep living this way." That hit home. She saw it in the way he flinched. "You think I'm choosing this? I think you're afraid of the alternative. I think letting go of power is terrifying. I think you've built your entire identity around being strong and in control, and the idea of being vulnerable feels like death. So you keep the empire because at least you know how to do that. But Sophia, you're dying anyway. Slowly. This life is killing you piece by piece. I can see it." The silence stretched between them. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "What if I try and fail? What if I start dismantling things and it all falls apart? What if people get hurt? What if you get hurt? Then at least you tried. At least you chose something different. Isn't that better than spending your life wondering what if?" Over the next month, Alessio began making changes. He met with Luca privately, long conversations behind closed doors. Called in trusted associates one by one, testing the waters. Started identifying which businesses could be legitimized, which partnerships could be dissolved, which relationships could be ended without bloodshed. It was delicate, dangerous work. Every conversation was a risk. Every admission of wanting out was a potential weakness for someone to exploit. But slowly, carefully, a plan emerged. Some of his people were relieved, tired of the constant danger, ready for legitimate lives. Others were loyal enough to support whatever he chose. A few had to be cut loose, paid off, sent away before they could become problems. Marco reported daily on security, on potential threats, on who was watching and what they were seeing. The villa became a fortress, Sophia never alone, never unguarded. Luca worked on business transitions, finding buyers for the criminal enterprises, establishing legal fronts for the legitimate ones. It would take time, maybe years, but it was happening. Sofia watched Alessio transform during this period. The weight he'd carried for so long began to lift. He smiled more, slept better, started playing piano again, something she hadn't heard before, his fingers pulling heartbreaking beauty from the keys. One evening she found him in the music room, playing Chopin with his eyes closed. She waited until the piece ended before speaking. That was beautiful. He turned, surprised. "How long have you been there?" "Long enough." "Why didn't you tell me you played?" "You never asked." She moved to sit beside him on the bench. "Play something else." "What do you want to hear?" "Something happy. Something that sounds like hope." His fingers found the keys, pulling out a melody she didn't recognize, but that made her heart lift. They sat together in the fading light, music filling the space between them, and Sofia felt something settle in her chest. Peace. Maybe. Or at least possibility. 3 months after the kidnapping attempt, Alessio called a meeting. Everyone who mattered in his organization gathered in the villa's formal dining room. Sofia watched from the doorway as he stood before them. "I'm getting out," he announced without preamble. "Not all at once, not tomorrow, but over the next 2 years. I'm transitioning everything to legitimate business or shutting it down. Those of you who want out, I'll help you. Those who want to stay in the life, I'll connect you with other families. Make sure you land on your feet. But I'm done." The room erupted, voices shouting over each other, accusations of betrayal, questions about loyalty, threats from those who saw opportunity in the chaos. Alessio let them rage. When the room finally quieted, he spoke again. "I'm not asking permission. I'm not seeking approval. I'm informing you of what's happening. You can accept it, or you can leave. But if you stay, you accept the new terms. We're going legitimate, or we're going our separate ways." Luca stood. "I'm with you. Whatever it takes." Marco nodded. "Same." One by one, the people who mattered declared their positions. Some walked out. Some stayed. When it was over, Alessio's empire was smaller, but more solid. Built on loyalty rather than fear. It wasn't over. Not remotely. There would be consequences. Rival families would see weakness and attack. People who depended on his criminal enterprises would cause problems. The transition would be bloody and difficult and dangerous. But it was started. The direction was set. That night, Sofia found Alessio on his balcony, staring at the city. "You did it," she said softly. "I started it. There's a difference. Still, you chose something different." He pulled her close. "Because of you. Not because of me. I just reminded you that you had choices. You made them yourself." They stood together watching the lights. Two people who'd found each other in impossible circumstances and decided to build something real from the wreckage. The months that followed were exactly as hard as predicted. 2 attempts on Alessio's life, both thwarted by Marco's security. 3 businesses burned by rivals. Countless threats. A constant state of tension that had Sofia jumping at shadows. But through it all, the transition continued. Legal businesses flourished. Criminal connections were severed. The empire transformed slowly from shadow to light. And somehow, impossibly, they survived. On the 1-year anniversary of the coffee incident, Alessio found Sofia in the library reading Dante. "Still working through hell?" she asked with a smile. "Actually," he sat beside her, "I think we've reached purgatory. The hard part where you climb toward redemption. Is it worth it?" "The climb?" He took her hand. "Ask me when we reach paradise." She kissed him softly. I don't think paradise is a destination. I think it's moments like this, choosing each other every day, building something real. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Then maybe this will make the climb easier. Sophia opened it to find a simple ring. Not ostentatious, not meant to show wealth. Just beautiful. "Marry me," he said. "Not because you owe me. Not because I have power over you. Marry me because you choose this. Because you choose us." Sophia stared at the ring, then at him, tears blurring her vision. "This is insane. You grabbed my wrist in a cafe a year ago and conscripted me into your life. We've been attacked, threatened, nearly killed. Your world is violence and danger and impossible choices. And you're asking me to marry you?" "Yes," she laughed through her tears. "Okay. Okay. Yes. Okay. I'll marry you. Because apparently, I'm as insane as you are. Because despite everything, despite logic and reason, I love you. Because you read me poetry and kiss me like I'm precious, and you're trying to be better. Because I choose this. I choose us." He slipped the ring onto her finger, kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. The wedding was small, private, just the household staff and a few trusted associates. No family, except Maria, who cried throughout the ceremony. No publicity, no announcement. Just two people making promises in the villa's garden while the city sprawled below them. They honeymooned nowhere, stayed in the villa because leaving was still too dangerous. But they had each other. Had the library and the music room and quiet mornings drinking coffee. Had plans for the future. Had hope. 6 months later, Sophia discovered she was pregnant. The news terrified her. Bringing a child into their world, even a world slowly transitioning to legitimacy, felt impossibly risky. What if something happened? What if their enemies used the baby against them? What if they failed? Alessio held her while she panicked, let her voice every fear. Then he said, "We'll protect them. We'll build a world where they're safe. We'll give them everything we didn't have. Choice. Freedom. A life without fear. And if we can't, then we'll die trying. But Sophia, I believe we can. Look how far we've come. Look what we've already built from nothing." The pregnancy transformed Alessio completely. He became impossibly protective, hovering over Sophia constantly. Accelerated the business transitions, made it clear to everyone remaining in his orbit that the baby was off limits, untouchable, protected by consequences too terrible to imagine. Marco tripled security. Maria fussed over Sophia's diet. Luca quietly eliminated potential threats before they could materialize. The whole household rallied around the coming child. Sophia spent her pregnancy reading in the library, painting the nursery, preparing for a future that felt miraculous and impossible. Some days, she still couldn't believe this was her life. That the girl who'd spilled coffee on a dangerous man's shirt had somehow ended up here, married, pregnant, building a family from chaos. The birth was difficult. Long hours of labor, complications that had the doctors worried. Alessio refused to leave her side, held her hand through every contraction, whispered encouragement when she was certain she couldn't continue. When their daughter finally arrived, screaming and perfect and impossibly tiny, Sophia watched Alessio hold her for the first time and saw something break and reform in his expression. "What should we name her?" Sophia asked. He looked at his daughter, this tiny person who carried all their hopes. "Lucia. Light. Because she's the light we've been climbing toward." Lucia Conti entered a world vastly different from the one her father had inherited, a world of legitimate business and careful safety. A world where protection came from lawyers and security teams rather than violence. A world still dangerous, still complicated, but trending toward light. Sophia spent the first weeks of motherhood exhausted and overwhelmed and completely in love. Alessio was hands-on from the start, changing diapers, doing midnight feedings, walking the floors when Lucia fussed. He was gentle and terrified and completely devoted. One night, Sophia found him in the nursery at 3 a.m., holding Lucia while she slept, just watching her breathe. "What are you doing?" she asked softly. "Making promises." "Like what?" He didn't look away from his daughter. "That she'll never know fear the way I did. That she'll grow up making choices because she wants to, not because she has no options. That she'll be loved and safe and free. That we'll build her a world worth living in. You're a good father. I'm trying. That's all any of us can do. Try to be better than we were. Try to give our children more than we had. Try to break cycles instead of perpetuating them." The months turned into years. Lucia grew from infant to toddler, taking her first steps in the villa's gardens, speaking her first words in a household that adored her. The business transitions completed. The empire that had defined Alessio's life became background noise, managed but not central. He kept some legitimate holdings, enough to maintain wealth and security. But the violence, the fear, the constant danger slowly faded. Not completely. There were always echoes, former associates who resurfaced with grudges, investigations that threatened to expose past crimes, moments when the old life tried to pull them back, but they held firm. They'd chosen a direction, and they kept choosing it, day after day. On Lucia's second birthday, they had a party in the garden, just close friends and staff. Maria, now elderly but still sharp, Luca and his wife. Marco, who'd become a godfather. No pomp, no show of power. Just people who genuinely cared. Celebrating a little girl who represented everything they'd fought to build. Sophia watched Alessio help Lucia blow out her candles, both of them laughing when she grabbed a fistful of cake instead. This moment, ordinary and perfect, was everything. "Do you remember," she said later that night after Lucia was asleep, "the day I spilled coffee on you? Every detail. I was so terrified. I was intrigued. You looked at me like I'd destroyed your world." "You had, just not in the way you thought." She leaned into him. "If I could go back, knowing everything that would happen, all the danger and fear and impossible choices, would I still spill that coffee? Would you still grab my wrist?" He kissed her temple. "Every time, in every universe, in every version of this story. Sophia, you saved my life. I ruined your shirt. You gave me a reason to change. To want something more than power and control. To believe redemption was possible. I was just a clumsy girl in a cafe. You were everything I needed and didn't know I was looking for." They stood at the window of Lucia's nursery, watching her sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling with perfect rhythm. The city sprawled below them, millions of lives being lived, millions of stories unfolding. Theirs was one of those. A mafia boss and a girl who spilled coffee. A captor and his captive, who became partners. Two broken people who found each other and discovered that broken pieces can fit together to make something whole. "You know what I realized?" Sophia said. "What?" "That first day, when you grabbed my wrist in the cafe, you said clumsy girls get punished. I've been waiting 3 years to ask what you meant." Alessio smiled. "Honestly?" "I had no idea. I was improvising, just saying something to establish control, to see how you'd react. So the whole punishment thing was made up. The punishment was real enough. I made you work off a debt, made you live in my home, made you endure my moods and my world. That's not punishment. That's life. Life together." He turned her to face him. "Sophia Conti, formerly Sophia the coffee spiller, currently Sophia, my wife and mother of my child. I need to tell you something." "What?" I would do it all again. Every mistake, every wrong turn, every dangerous choice. Because they all led here. To you. To us. To her, he gestured at their sleeping daughter. To this moment. "I don't believe in fate," she said, "but I believe in choice, and I'd choose you every time, even knowing what it cost, even knowing what it cost. Because the cost bought us this. Us. Family, love, hope, a future we're building ourselves instead of inheriting from broken men who came before." He pulled her close, rested his forehead against hers. "Do you know what the hardest part was?" "Of what?" "Of changing. Of walking away from everything I knew. It wasn't the danger or the logistics or the business complications. It was believing I deserved this. Deserved you. Deserved a normal life after everything I'd done. What made you believe it?" "You did. Every day, you looked at me like I was already the man I wanted to become. Like my past didn't define my future. Like redemption wasn't a destination but a direction. And as long as I kept walking toward light instead of darkness, I was worthy of love. That's the power of love, isn't it? Not that it changes people against their will, but that it shows them who they could be and gives them the courage to become it." They stayed like that, holding each other in the soft glow of the nightlight. Two people who'd found each other in impossible circumstances and decided possibility was enough. Outside, the city glittered with a million stories. Inside, they held their own story close. A story that started with spilled coffee and a grabbed wrist. A story that passed through captivity and choice, through danger and transformation, through fear and hope. A story that was still being written, still unfolding, still becoming whatever they chose to make it. And maybe that's the truth we all need to learn, Sophia thought. That purity isn't about being untouched by darkness. It's about choosing light anyway. That love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone whose imperfections fit yours. That redemption isn't a single moment of salvation. It's a daily practice of becoming better than you were yesterday. That power isn't about control. It's about the courage to be vulnerable. Alessio had been terrified that day in the cafe, though he'd never admit it. Terrified of the chaos she represented. Terrified of what it meant to suddenly care about something beyond his carefully controlled world. But she'd been right to push, right to stay, right to choose him even when it made no sense, because she'd seen something in him worth believing in, worth fighting for, worth loving. And in seeing that, she'd made it real. That's the miracle, she realized. Not that damaged people can change, but that love can show us who we truly are beneath the damage. Not that captivity can become freedom, but that choice can transform any circumstance. Not that tragedy must become comedy, but that we decide which story we're living. Tomorrow, Lucia would wake and fill the house with noise and laughter. Tomorrow, Alessio would continue building legitimate businesses and leaving the darkness behind. Tomorrow, Sophia would paint and read and love her family. Tomorrow, they would choose each other again, and the day after, and the day after that. But tonight, they stood in the quiet dark, holding each other, two people who'd collided by accident and stayed together by choice. Two people who'd spilled and grabbed and then decided to hold on, who'd built something real from something impossible, who'd learned that punishment wasn't what happened when you were clumsy. Punishment was living without love, without hope, without the courage to reach for something better. Redemption was in the reaching, in the trying, in the daily choice to be more than your circumstances, in the grace to believe broken things can be beautiful. Lucia stirred in her crib, made a small sound, then settled back into sleep. Alessio reached over, gently touched her hair. "She'll never have to be afraid," he said quietly. "Never have to hide who she is. Never have to become something she's not to survive. She'll have choices I never had." Sophia squeezed his hand. "Because you chose to give her those choices. Because you decided the cycle stopped with you. That's what makes you extraordinary. Not the power you had, but the power you gave up. Not the empire you built, but the empire you dismantled. Not the violence you were capable of, but the gentleness you chose instead." He kissed her softly. "We should sleep. Tomorrow starts early with her, in a moment. Just let me hold this moment, this peace, this impossible, ordinary, extraordinary life we've built." They held it together, held each other, held their daughter's future in their careful hands. And outside, the city slept and dreamed and waited for tomorrow, where more coffee would be spilled, and more wrists would be grabbed, and more impossible stories would begin. But this story, their story, had found its direction. Toward light. Toward love. Toward each other. Always toward each other. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from. And if you felt it was really worth it, consider becoming a member to get early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt this story was really worth listening to, click the Super Thanks button. Your gesture makes all the difference and helps us continue creating stories that touch the soul.